Oh, yeah, I don't really have something particular prepared, so it will be maybe a bit improvised. And I'm not really going to talk about my work in particular, because I think you can just watch it, yeah, on your any time between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. on my page, for which Jordan can give you the link. And maybe what I'm interested to talk about is like thinking out loud a little bit, which are themes that refer and that are related to my own position, where maybe I would not refer to myself as a net artist, because for me there is very hard to say where is the border between being an artist of my generation that is, let's say, aware, not necessarily internet aware, but and who is a net artist, or internet-aware artist, or a post-internet artist. Because for me, I usually say that we never disconnect. So for me, it's hard to say that I act or do or communicate with people without the effect of the internet, no matter if I'm on the street, if I'm on Skype, on phone, on Facebook. So I believe that internet, especially for us who grew up with it, or at least I was introduced to it at a gymnasium, at a high school, has affected our behavior so deeply that, to me personally, it doesn't make much of a sense to call myself a net artist and to talk about my work as a specifically net-related until it is a work on YouTube, let's say. But then it's again just a material and rather a space where I find it appropriate to present the work, or it's a material that is concretely of my interest at that moment, and it can be themes that come back again, and maybe then they circulate in various mediums, from an object, a sculpture, or a browser-specific art piece, let's say. But what concerns me in all these very basic things mostly could start from the picture that I would imagine if I would be talking in a little bit an older way of talking about internet art as a surfer. So a net artist surfing the internet and a net artist being a surfer. So if I use that as a visual kind of motif for what I'm going to talk about, what is the most interesting nowadays, which is a result and came with the internet, but is a continuation of other media that came before the internet. So we cannot really say that this is a great break, because of these things come with us being able to see it through a new medium, so we can finally understand the previous medium. But so just not to jump too much out of it, if I will look at the picture of the surfer, I can say that we are surfing in rapid speeds with like very strong, on a speedboat with very strong winds, and we have rarely to any time to look at the deep of the sea underneath us. So what we have mostly time to grasp is just the amount, the volume of the water that is surrounding us, which has a horizon that is always escaping us as we are moving. And we then change quantity for quality. And we are living under attack of this speed, where we have to react to almost everything, where we are acting within seconds, while we should rather maybe slow down and act in terms of minutes or days, and not be afraid of this kind of taking a distance, taking a break. But the problem is that then we can face the risk of falling from the surf, let's say. As we all know that if you're standing on a sea, on a surf that is not moving, it's pretty hard to balance it. And with this, we are surfing half naked, which is a little bit what I will refer to later, which is something for me that is nice visualization of Web 2.0. And something we could talk about as a contemporary form of narcissism. Because of when we are surfing on the water that is so quick, and we have to balance every tiny wave of that water with a very quick reaction that has also very limited space for operation because it has to act so quickly. We mostly only deflect or repeat or act with a strength that is again very limited because of there is no time to really make to have a voice when we act, or to make a step that would be a little bit above the normalized level of the water, let's say. So then we kind of end up with this dementing eat and shit tempo, because of we just have to survive, not to fall, because we are afraid that then we would really have to deal. And maybe what I would get back to later, or maybe I can get to it now, let's say if we are on the water, we can also see our reflection on the water, which is why I kind of like the surfing motif, because it combines a lot of thoughts that can use this kind of a picture from various viewpoints. So then you can also say that it's very not very coherent, but this will just come later when it changes from surfing on water into surfing in the fog. So if I can look underneath my board and see my reflection, the reflection is never still because it's on water and I'm moving, and all these waves make it unstable. And what I'm trying to do with, you can see mostly with the Web 2.0 services, where you have a lot of statistics, you have a lot of lists, you have a lot of profiles that are trying to show you your efforts within categories, and in some kind of empathic way also connect you with other people that share these kind of interests and that have the same rates, that have the same likes, and that artificially, statistically, should be somebody you could see yourself through. But this image with the speed that comes on the water with the wind and everything is always changing, which is a terror for us in a way. But the problem why we are participating in this terror is that we are grown also in a generation, which is not the first generation with this problem, where we are not growing up with a clear image of what we should be like, which would be maybe an image we do disagree with, but the father position in the society, and also after the death of God and all these things, and after the planet is, after satellites are rotating around the planet and turn it from nature into an artwork, let's say, and from the moment where we also can be everywhere and anywhere and anytime, and from the death of God, most importantly, where there is nobody to tell us what is right and what is wrong, and where we have to be our own policemen that are way too tough to be sure that you are not going to misbehave, then the narcissist that we would think that we can see all over the Web 2.0 is not a phenomena of self-love, but it's the opposite. It's phenomena driven by absence and not by presence. Because we are constantly unsure of what we are, and with all these tools that could create our profile, we are trying to hunt it, and we are hunted by this. But the problem is that as it's part of this time where everything is moving so quickly, it's just a terror, because we can't really make anything stable. And as well as we are living in a time where there is no fixed position for us, we are slowly kind of getting to a point where our civilization is getting closer to what Marshall McLuhan and Onk are talking about when they are interested in oral cultures versus literary cultures. Because with the coming of written word and print, we became very much thinking in terms of visual senses, in aesthetics, and also with the written word we kind of finally we got the ability to distinguish and to analyze things. And then we started seeing ourselves as living in space. While people in oral cultures, they had no sense of space in this term. They usually relate themselves, and everything is relative. So there is a nice illustration of it when somebody was walking with the Indians in the bushes, and they said, "Oh, we are lost. We don't know how to get to the lake." And the Indian said, "No, we are not lost. The lake is lost." Because of the differences in the way we relate within the space to this goal, let's say. And slowly and then with the literary culture, what was always very strengthening within that was getting a fixed position or getting a viewpoint, which is a phenomenon of the 20th century. And with the internet and all this new media, these things are slowly falling apart. And also, what was very strong with the what is very strong, because of course we are living with the residue of the oral cultures, but predominantly we are living in the literary culture. What is very strong is that we perceive everything as a constant flow, everything in a way very linearly, and which is something very absent in sound. Because if you would stop sound, you have nothing. You cannot slice it. You cannot grasp a word in its complete form. You can only grasp the very tiny particle of it, which doesn't mean anything by itself. And in a very elliptic way, we are kind of getting into a time where these two things are kind of getting in a relation where the things which we could see in the oral cultures are getting stronger. We are living. So let's say when I get back to the surfing, if I would say that the surfer is surfing on these very quick waters and is afraid to fall into his own image, let's say on the water, that it looks nice, but actually we are living in a time when there is no water. We are just living in a time where we are surfing in fog, and we don't have a horizon, and we cannot say, as with the internet and being online or being offline, we cannot say where is the water level and where is the air level, because of these two just melt into each other, and we cannot divide one from the other. And with this fog, the same happened to the image, which starts to be fragmentized into tiny pieces and particles, and it's kind of flying everywhere around us, and we have no hold of it. So once we create it, it's just out of our hands, which is also part of the drive, which makes us still surfing, let's say, and still recreating the image and renewing it, because it's the same with the reflection with the water. You have no clue, and it slowly disappears as far as when it goes under the level and the amount of light is getting weaker and weaker. And so now we have to find ourselves we find ourselves in a position where we don't have continuation, as I wanted to say before, with the literary culture, but we have things that are rather separate and that are in patterns. And with the speed that is so quick, we finally can see the patterns in a way, because in the times where everything was moving slowly, you could not see patterns so well, because you didn't have this kind of a distance that the speed gives you nowadays. But because of, as I said, it's rather a fog phenomena or feeling, you also know that there is no way to fix it. And when I would take this all and start thinking about what is an artist supposed to do in such situation, is that, or not only artists, but let's say what would anybody should do, is that we should start to think about how to slow down and not to be a slave of this movement. I look at a lot of blogs, for example, that are, let's say, the artist blogs, or as an image aggregator blogs, which are kind of trying to accumulate images on some specific pattern, and they are mostly taken out of context. It can first look as a study of a phenomenon that is part of long tail. This maybe I should explain later, or that is some phenomena that can be taken from all these viewpoints and can look like something omnipresent. For me, the problem with these kind of blogs is that we have to also find a position or we have to be able to find out what is really worth to spend time with, what is really worth to pick from all this fog, where everything is normalized, where content of a great quality standing right next to a content of no importance. So the same thing for me is with many of these blogs, that at the end it looks more like building a brand and building a look, because of the images are coming and going so quickly that none of them is really important, but there is also in a way no real and no clear pattern that you could take out and understand as the core message, which can be also a good thing, because of at the end we should be kind of happy that now we are living in this fog situation rather than in the situation where we clearly know what is water, what is the sun, and what is the board, let's say. Because of in such situation, it's a situation when economical and capitalistic mega machine is able to keep us in order and is able to have an overview and is able to really force, while in the fog we have much more possibilities for ways how to behave on our own paths within the structure that is given to us, within the rules that we hardly can escape them, or we can protest against them, but mostly we just support what we're protesting against, as more as we communicate with the same language as the thing we are against. So what I would like to point at is that if I looked at the image aggregation blocks, I would not doom them in total, but they're showing something that is maybe very temporary, but should be looked at from the side as something which is communicating indirectly, which is something also very native to the fog situation, and is rather interesting also from this kind of fact that it's escaping the clear communication, which at the end serves just for categorization and force that is putting us in order to be able to predict our movements and stuff like that. So if I think of my own position as an artist in a world where I cannot escape and cannot really change in total the rules that are put on me, I'm mostly interested in looking at phenomena that are important and worth spending time at and pointing at, and then not really maybe communicate directly what would be a problem with them, which is maybe also the same problem with my talk, which I, of course, didn't prepare to that extent that also, yeah, whatever, that I would know where it will end, but we should always try to not to escape, let's say, into safety of fragments of things that are not really important, but are in the quantity that can give us enough material to spend time with them, and not to enclose ourselves in these tiny fragments and these tiny pieces of water flying in the air around us. We should rather bear in mind that we should really live in the current situation, a little bit forget about the possibility to be everywhere and anywhere, which is rather a bad effect of media, where we know about what is going on in North Africa, what is going on in Asia, what is going on in Thailand and whatsoever. And then it makes us also kind of weak to act in the place where we actually live, because of with the viewpoint of with the global viewpoint, everything comes to be so relative that we don't have the guts to have a voice and to act, because we know that it will be always aggressive against someone. And then the hardest thing to do is to find a way how to have a voice, how to be maybe partly ignorant and how to be partly aggressive, and at the same time not to be too clear and not to be too much working on the basis of a strategy which can be then predicted and which can be read from the system above us or from the system that is surrounding us, to be subdued to the rules and to the way the machine we are in works. So with what I call the fog situation, the best we can do with it is not to dive into tiny problems that can accumulate, and once we dive into them, we will always find other people that are sharing this interest with us, which is what the Web 2.0 is actually supporting a lot. Because even if you will be listening to the most obscure death metal band that has never released anything and has 3 songs, all of a sudden you will see that there are 200 people that has listened to it. Somehow you will feel connected, and somehow it will feel like that it has an importance. And I don't mean that we should all listen to, I don't know, like Lady Gaga, but that's totally something else. But the problem is that it also forces us in a way to feel like that we share and feel that we participate, where we actually don't, until a specific moment when we kind of really step out of this kind of fascination with every detail, with if it would be back on the water motif, with every tiny wave to which we have to respond. So what is more important, I think, is not to be afraid to fall into the water and to lose the balance, because then we can maybe fall into something deeper than just to float on the water that is endless and that is all normalized and kind of gray. Yeah, I think 20 minutes is kind of enough.
All right, let's see if we have any questions. That was really nice.
Oh, that was kind of hallucinated, as I said before in the email.
It was a beautiful hallucination. So what questions do we have?
I have one. So earlier you were talking about the oral tradition versus the written, the literal culture, and I guess I got a little confused. Were you saying that the internet is sort of moving us from the more literal culture to something more like the oral culture?
Yeah, I mean, this would be for like probably for long to get to the point where it's also clear what it means to move from one to another, because of one thing is that we will never it's like with the folk, you will never be able to distinguish or like to separate one from another. And even when we talk, when I say preliteral cultures, you would think of something that has died out very easily. But on a lot of places in the world, there are various places, there are various levels of the residue of the oral cultures. And even in our, let's say, highly developed culture, and the way we would think that we are like really like living in the written word, there are still residues even within us that come from the oral mentality, which because of it's maybe not also clear what it really stands for. So the most basic, maybe how to describe the difference between the two, is that in the oral culture, there was no interest in having, or like, you would be really living, let's say, if I make it a little bit esoteric, at the current time, at the current place. And because of you cannot write down what you're talking about and what you're doing. You don't have a step away from it, so you don't really have a distance to the communication and the language. So you don't really have the ability, in most cases, to analyze what you're doing. So you don't have an analytical thinking at all. So you don't know what is geometry, for example. People would refer to things that are round as a sun. They would not say this is a circle. They would just relate it to a sun or a moon, because for them that's something that has also kind of a physical presence in the word when they say it, and also the speech itself would be much stronger act than it is now, because of it would be very direct and kind of very physical. So for what came, or like what is coming with the internet, let's say, it's a little bit also like why I said that it's coming back. It's a little bit connected to some kind of a participation that has got much more strong, where before we would have let's say, you cannot dispute with a book. It's just written there, and you can think what you want about it, but there is no space for arguing about what is written in the book. And of course, this like would it could easily get to some cheesy prosumer kind of aesthetic. But for us, or maybe what I said before, what kind of referred to it mostly from the little I said, is that now we are living in this space where things are attacking from all the from all the sides, which is a little bit the phenomenon better known with sound than with visual kind of thinking. And because of sound is also directive, and you cannot catch it, and you cannot, like, you can close your eyes and you will not see simply anything, but you can hardly do this with hearing, for example. But I mean, with this orality coming back, yeah, because it's a little bit hard to like jump into it, so to say. But it's rather a profit. Yeah, this sounds also cheesy.
Okay.
Some other questions. So when you mentioned Ong, were you referring to his essay on writing as a technology that restructures thought, or some of the similar works where he talks about the shift in thought process given pre-literate, oral, and then post-photographic cultures?
Or like, I mean, what I referred to from Walter J. Ong is the book, the only one that I have read, which is called Orality versus Literacy.
Okay.
And then Marshall McLuhan is actually referring to Ong as Father Ong pretty often as well.
Right.
And in that book, for example, that's mostly about showing because of course for us it's almost impossible to imagine what it is to be living within the oral culture, because we hardly realize our own literacy in that kind of way. So we can, it's fascinating when then you see, for example, talking, for example, epos and all the culture that was transformed by speech was based a lot on repetition, because that was a tool how to memorize things. And there was a lot of redundancy because of that repetition. The message that you would have in a literal culture, you would be able to stretch out so many parts of the text if you would just transcribe what is said within the epic of the oral culture, for example. These are all tools that affected the writing for a very long time, which is the most interesting, actually, part of the whole work of Walter J. Ong, because if you can see how long it takes and how kind of complicatedly it takes to get rid of these residues, and the way we understand the writing through the eyes of talking, which is the same when Marshall McLuhan is talking about other media in general, that if we have a movie, we are actually the content of the movie as a book, and this way it would always degrade the letter underneath. It's because of that's the same with maybe there was this idea of an artist being as one of the few people that can get out of some situation or out of some context to see it from outside, and then to open the eyes for others that are involved in it, because of this kind of outsiderish position. But that's, for example, something that I'm afraid that is getting much harder in the situation now, where we can hardly see any borders, so we can hardly get out of, let's say, the sphere which would be a problem or a phenomena we want to talk about or we want to make work based on.
So you see this as something that's not only affecting online space, but also offline space. It's pervasive.
I mean, for me, this question is a little bit already like, yeah, I don't really think that there is any difference between online and offline space, or I don't really believe that there is offline space in that way. For me, there is no offline space. Now I'm for 3 months in Norway, in Hill, where there are 6 people with me, and there is a city with 1,000 citizens. So I could say that I'm pretty detached and hermetic, and even if I would switch off my computer for a whole month, or maybe a year, it would take really a long time that I would stop thinking and communicating and socializing with other people through my experience of the internet. With the Facebook, when Facebook became my own newsroom, where I don't even have to be logged in to be happening, because of when I have a Facebook account, I am not what I put on my profile only, but I'm as well what I'm reading through the reader in my profile, which is a little bit with the watching Martin Kohout work on the YouTube, the channel I did. That was part of the thing a little bit, that which is the same with a piece that I did a long time ago, which was called Last Tech Show with Last FM. We are often asked when we interact with somebody new, the people usually ask, what music are you listening to? And that's kind of a very nice point for the Last FM or Audio Scobra that it was called at that time, where people had statistics and charts, and they could see, oh, this is the band I was listening the most last week, this is the band I was listening the most last month, and this is my overall top 20, whatever. And then when somebody else is looking at it, or even me, as I spoke about the narcissist that is always trying to find himself in some kind of in an external image of himself. So there I could say, oh, this is me. This is a portrait of myself. This is telling. And what was the, yeah, and then, sorry. And this is affecting me as well with the Facebook. I'm not only what I write as my update status, but I'm pretty much also what I read through the network of people I choose to be my friends or people I subscribe to. And that's something, let's say, private, because of others can see my friend list, but they cannot see into this. But the problem is that it's happening even when I'm not online. There will be things happening about me on Facebook. There will be new pictures with me being tagged. There will be people putting like this kind of hyperlink name into their text. I will be happening in a little bit different way than I would be happening when people would speak on the street about me there. But then it's the ellipse that I kind of see as the oral kind of thing going back, because of that's based on the thing that in the, and I don't mean that I don't want to generalize, because then it would be like, of course, so it's necessary to take it within specific borders, but with the written word and with the reading that is so nicely and tightly organized to go from top left corner to the right and or otherwise whatever, with this linearity we also have continuation, and we're usually thinking of things as happening and in a like historically or in time as happening as a cascade of events that follow one another. This is something that the oral cultures were not so sure about, like not really bound to that much. And this is coming back. And this is an effect of things like Facebook, and not only, like, it's not that it would come with the internet, but I see it rather positive. But of course, nothing has only one side. So when I look at the image aggregation blogs that has been lately, for the last 2 years maybe, interest of a lot of people writing on internet art, it's also very hard to find the border, yeah, like as if there was like a horizon from, or like to find one fixed viewpoint through which I will find it positive or negative what is happening there. Because of, as I said before, that whatever, and that's referring to Michel de Certeau, who is writing on so-called tactics in his work that is called The Practice of Everyday Life, where so tactics are opposed to strategies, which is strategy would be rules or way a dominant system is setting up the structure for the people that are going to be involved in it. Let it be people working in an office, or people within some social group, or people as citizens. But each particular person will handle these rules and this structure and these roads where you're supposed to, and paths where you're supposed to walk, his own way, and they will deflect the rules for their own purpose, which will be the tactics. So that will be the way, the path and the trajectory of how you move within this structure that is fixed and that is very rigid and that cannot act very spontaneously, and that cannot change very quickly, because of then it would not be strong enough to survive in time, which is the main goal of the strategy of whatever it is, if it's again like a company or if it's a government, because of we as persons in the system, we can change the way we operate from any minute to any minute. Yeah, that's the thing. And with this possibility, we don't often, or the tactics importantly, are opposed to the strategies with this atemporality. Maybe they're repeating, but they're not repeating for the sake of developing and improving often. So, because of this, they also cannot be traced in the sense that they could be predicted. And so when I would be talking about the blocks, there is this fact about them, which I like, that for me it feels like some kind of a fashion which will die out. But it's a good fashion in that sense, if it doesn't want to be something that is terribly going to survive for 10 years. And that's rather positive. And connected with this rather non-communication, which is part of it, which is for me rather a theme that we, exactly as I said, that we live in this attack of the speed. It's not only attack of the speed, it's also attack of communication. And it's this terribly, it's a terror of meaning, because of to be put in order, to be ruled, we have to become communicative and we have to show and uncover meaning of whatever we do. Because of then we can be put into correct categories, and then we can be, oh, thanks, smile. Yeah. And then we can be ruled perfectly. But if we will not participate on the communication to the very extent that it would be communication per se or for its own sake, then we can create a space where with this undirectness and with this little bit non-knowing, we will gain some freedom and we will gain some life. Because of every, let's say, every time we get closer to the rules, the more we get dead, in a way. Because then we become just like a clock in a machine which is working perfectly, oiled perfectly, and everybody is going to do their own jobs as the system wants them. And then they will be just a machine. It's the same when, oh, that would be way too far. But yeah, what I meant is that I kind of, with the blocks, if I get to something concrete back, what I find very positive and something to support is this thing that you cannot really tell what is the drive behind them, or you cannot really tell what is the content of them. But then still, of course, you can see, I don't know, one of it will be just pictures of ergonomic design, and some of them will be just pictures of African people using pieces of broken technology and they have no clue what it is for, and then it's turned into a utilizing tool that has nothing to do with its original purpose. But then within these kind of fields, what I think that people very easily forget is that not everything is really worth such activity. And so there is the hardest is to find position where you will be undirect enough to live, and at the same time concrete, and maybe rather occupied with something general and important, that is already a little bit understood, and that has to be enlightened, that has to be put light on, and at the same time that has to go public. So not to escape with this kind of comfort of non-communication into some tiny problems and tiny waters where like there are little waves in the fog and little winds, because of then you're just escaping and prolonging your life, which already is not really like living, let's say. It's a phenomena that comes a lot with artists that are occupied with, or I mean, Wikipedia is just a great source for it, that many people are working with historical material, because of its, we have, in the situation where we are terrorized by the speed and the terror of meaning, and at the same time we are very unsure with the political and economical situation, and especially since, let's say, Bush era, we rather have hard time to think about the future, because of it can feel as something very unsecure and uncertain. But we can always look back into the past, and there it seems that everything is tidy and everything is clear, and we can have much more hopes in material there than proposing or working with a futuristic viewpoint, let's say. And there can be a lot of material that we can learn from and that can tell us something about the society now, or the problems now, or the situation now. But often people are not able to forget, which is a quality we should all keep, to be able to forget healthily things that are not worth remembering, and not to dive, if I mentioned it once, not to dive into the part of the long tail, which is a marketing term or economical term originally, which refers to, let's say, when we had the Stone bookstore, they would have a limited space in the store, physically. So they would have a limited amount of bookshelves, and because they have to sell stuff. So then they would have also very limited amount of titles that they know that are selling well, and there would be very little space that they could devote to things that are of a minor interest. But when online stores came, this has changed, because of the online stores didn't have to have shelves to expose what they are selling. So all of a sudden, where they were selling 120 books before, or items, now they could be selling 800 items. And there is this thing that is called the power law, which says that 20%, let's say it could be 20% of the Americans would own 80% of the land, or when you have an earthquake, it's the same that, to simplify it, mostly that small number of things have huge impact. So you can look at the Stone bookstore as that place where they sell 20% of the things available that they could have in the stock. And then when the online store came and started selling also this 80%, or maybe now I can use the screen sharing actually, because I open the picture. Oh, that's nice. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the head that you can see on the left side, that would be what the classical store would be selling, let it be books or let it be CDs or whatever. And the blue is because of here you could say this is sales, or no, this can be popularity, and these are products, except of keywords. And here the blue one is the long tail, which is the 80%. Of course here it's cut, but in a way it could go endlessly, and you would hardly see its end. And then when this came to be possible as a marketing for the stores, they didn't have to care that here that they sell maybe this title that would be positioned here, that they sell it maybe 5 times a year or 3 times a year, because of in total they are selling all these, so they don't care, because of then it just becomes one book amongst many. And what is shown later on is that this blue part of things of minor interest make as profit as the part which is called the head, where you have 20% of the products. And this, at the end, is not only a phenomena that we should think about in relation to economics. Oh, the light. Oh, that's me probably. Yeah. But it is something we can see, for example, on YouTube, where all of a sudden you don't have to go to cinema to see a movie. You can just go online and see a video on YouTube. And YouTube is one of the biggest spaces where the long tail is ruling, or like is in force. And then what it brings also is what I was saying before with the music, that you will find tiny groups of people that finally can get united. Before, you were maybe some pervert interested in something so specific that you would never hear about anybody else with the same interest or same need. Because if you would go to this normal store, you would not even find any material of your interest. But now, all of a sudden, you don't have to care about your location so much. So you will be able to find networks that are of tiny scale, but are very active. And if you would look at it in fractals, they kind of would have their own hierarchy again, and it would be its own universe. And then the only difference is the scale. Let's say, oh, of course, it's like a problem, or it's different when people can really gather together somewhere physically or not. But you would have this space where it's kind of auto-generating already, because from tiny little particles, a snowball will easily come into life. And then with the time when this is maybe a bit trumped. Like as things around us get more and more abstract, let's say, do monetarization, or like because of the money value, or in general when we look at stuff around us, or like we are living things that thanks to the literal culture and stuff, we are living a lot in like abstract way of thinking and seeing stuff around us. So with this, what comes is also, with the dematerialization, comes more space for irrationality and combinations that are all of a sudden flooding the long tail. And this can be something, if I say that, then it in the fractal can remind other levels, or like other fractals of a bigger importance. It can be very easily something that you will fall into. And of course, if it's something very personal, it has importance, but it can also easily be very deceptive and escape it, like an escapism to something that is too tiny and too ridicule and too fragmental of the bigger image to be really important at the end. And of course, it's a question of what is your goal. If you're an artist, you don't have to immediately have your goal in some kind of a social or political role. But if you do, then it's very important to be picky with what you're going to work with. And what is a problem for me with a lot of internets related with a lot of, let's say, internet art, if I've simplified no matter what this term, it can sound very stupid that I use it after I said that there is no online and offline, but of course there's like a browser-specific works. What I sometimes am very bored by is that if I go through Tumblrs and through artist profiles, often it's things that, it's a works and themes and phenomena that come, which I just don't think are really so telling or so relevant. And thanks to this feeling of it, I think it's still because of it has only a few generations that are working in that space. We kind of mostly feel like this kind of smallness is correct because of there are not so many people that understand it properly. But it can be also self-deceiving because of the most important phenomena are mostly related also something that has happened outside of the internet. And it usually, of course, I mean, these things that I would criticize, they usually, of course, don't affect much positively, neither negatively, so they're kind of harmless. But then the question is if that should be our goal, let's say. And then maybe it also relates to a lot of things that I have done myself that are working on a meta level. But even in that case, I think there are a lot of works done that have sense and that really handle it well. But yeah.
Are there any other questions? That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm